think I'm gonna sit there.
All right, so I'm gonna sit. I think we'll all move down one so Patrick can sit there.
Okay.
Alrighty. Final day of a conference in Las Vegas, huh? We've got some brave souls sitting around thus far. Hope everyone has had a fantastic time thus far at Ascend. For those of you who might not be playing with a full deck of cards today, quite literally, hopefully this is a session that will get people a little bit more lively and fired up. So the session itself is engaging the public through the International Space Station. Sounds pretty easy, right? I mean, space is inherently cool. I think all of us at this conference, all of us within this industry would echo that. But that's also our own bubble. You know, we are within our own echo chamber. So the real question is, how is it that we are able to engage with people outside of our bubble, to get them excited about what is happening in space, in low Earth orbit, to get them excited about possibly becoming a researcher, an engineer, or in this particular case, a lowly comms guy. It takes all of us to come together to tell the story of doing space and doing it effectively. And in some ways, it requires being able to work with highly recognizable brands or entities to be able to communicate that message. I oftentimes tell our science and business development team at the ISS National Lab, 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 projects. You give me 9 of them that are hardcore science, tech dev, material science, what have you, but I need 1. Give me 1 out of 10 that has the ability to galvanize the general public, get people excited about what is happening on the space station in low Earth orbit, and then that will allow me to sprinkle in the goodness of the other 9 projects. So that kind of leads us to today's conversation. This is truly a comms person's dream, if you will, because we have an all-star lineup of individuals who have taken the time out to come and join us here at Ascend in Las Vegas. And so first and foremost, I'm very grateful for all of you to do that. While we are here, they will talk about what it is that they have done on the space station, how it is that they are using their platforms to influence individuals within the space community and inspire others to be more involved in what it is that we do in low Earth orbit and potentially beyond. So I could read off bios, but that is quite boring. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of run down the line, allow each individual to introduce themselves, who they are, where they're from, and what it is that they are doing on the space station or in space in general is bringing value to humanity. Then from there, I will pepper them with some very, very hard questions. And last but not least, if there is time available, we will take questions from you, the audience. So with that, James, you're right next to me, so why don't we get started?
Love it. Thank you. So hello, everyone. I am James Sawyer. I'm the Tide Brand Director at Procter Gamble. And thank you, Patrick, for having us. This is a great opportunity. I want to talk a little bit about why we've partnered with the ISS and why this partnership also has a lot of things that we can reapply to our business down here at Earth. So Tide's been around for 75 years, and we have been the market leader in the laundry detergent space for that time because we have been focused on developing and innovating for consumers. And not surprisingly, consumers continue to demand better and better clean from their products. But also, consumers are facing a laundry process that is becoming more and more resource constrained. And we look at that in 2 different ways. And these are both ways that are also very applicable to what we'll talk about on the ISS. One of which is water usage. You read it in the news, you know it's a fact of life. We need to find ways to be able to deliver what the consumer needs in ways that's more and more efficient from a water usage standpoint. Machines are using less water, so we have to develop products that are really effective at cleaning in those conditions. If we think about laundry in space, there's not exactly a lot of water to spare. So we're looking at ways to develop detergents that are so effective in low water environments like in the ISS, and finding ways to take those learnings and bring them back down here to Earth. The other half of the resource-constrained reality is energy. Much like water, energy is not exactly something that is excessively plentiful in space. If we think about the needs of laundry in the ISS, we have to find ways to get that done effectively and efficiently. If we think about laundry here on Earth, heating water actually uses 90% of the energy in the laundry process. It is a massive amount. And the reality is we want to find ways to develop products that clean effectively in cold water so that consumers don't feel the need to use warm water, hot water that uses that energy. We say it is an ambitious way to drive sustainability and also an ambitious way to increase the longevity of the clothes that consumers are using. Again, if we think about the application in space, we want to find ways to clean astronauts' clothing without needing a whole bunch of energy. So for us, it's been a really, really, really great way to pair our ambitions here on Earth with some of the opportunities we can provide up in space.
Jen?
A very tough act to follow. I'm Jen Buckmaster. I'm here from Microsoft. My role is specifically music and entertainment partnerships, so a little bit far removed from the day-to-day of space. But by and large, my job is to find ways to encourage and drive brand love for the company and telling really exciting stories that are tied to topics that are so important to our business, like STEM and EDU. We're always looking for compelling ways to be more innovative and to inspire consumers to want to try things that they maybe wouldn't have tried without, some of those hooks. So yeah, I'll be talking a little bit about some of our partnerships and about some of the ways that we're thinking about our partnerships in space.
Miss England.
Hello everybody, my name is Jess Gagen. I've come from England, as I'm sure you've probably guessed. And my background from university is actually in aerospace engineering. And I use my platform to empower young girls and show young girls about what opportunities are out there in the aerospace sector. But not only just that, my story to get into my degree, my sash has fallen off, sorry. My story into getting into my degree wasn't the usual type. My background was in modelling, and I think it's really important that a lot of young children realise that they don't have to fit into a box. Like, the things you like don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can be the fashion model and the aerospace engineer. And I use my platforms to showcase STEM as a whole, showcase all the fabulous opportunities that STEM can lead, but also educate as to all the different roles we need in space, the different types of people, whether that's in comms, that could be scientists, it could be engineers, teachers. All of us have a role to play, and so I do my best to use my platform to educate the next generation about that.
Last but not least, way down there we got Andrew.
My name's Andrew Shulkind. I'm head of capture for Sphere, that ball that's down the street here, and we're excited. It's sort of well-timed with this conference because we just opened, and we're excited to finally share this thing that we've been cooking for the last 6 years with the world. The purpose of the venue is really to transport people, to take people to places they can't otherwise go. Space seems like at the top of that list, and so for that reason and others, because the benefit of the venue is really about taking all the best technology of the day and applying that forward to share with a big group of people at one time, and kind of go the inverse direction of driving to mobile to take this huge collective experience and take people on a journey. Space has been really interesting and attractive to us, and I'm also the PI on a project that we've been doing on station with ISS National Labs.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that intro. What do you say we jump into some questions and get into some trouble?
Let's do it.
All right, James, you are right next to me once again, so you get to be the guinea pig. So a few years back, your team synced up with NASA to develop a Space Act agreement, wherein it was a joint venture to understand laundry solutions in space. Yep. So at a real basic level, why did your team even feel the need to work with NASA in this regard?
Absolutely. If we think about what astronauts go through in space, which I'll touch on a little bit, it is the perfect torture test for our products. And when I was informed of this, I was immediately excited about the opportunity that we had. So astronauts have to exercise for 14 hours a week to maintain their fitness in space. The other fascinating factoid is that with the inability to do laundry in space today, they wear their clothes for around 30 days before having to replace them. And replacing clothes in space is not exactly as simple as going in your closet. You have to send it up from Earth. So we knew that there was a great opportunity for us to help out the astronauts. But again, going back to this idea of torture tests and also looking for ways to develop products that work extremely effectively in resource-constrained environments, we saw the opportunity to use this torture test as something that we could bring back down to Earth and use the learnings that we have from our work on the ISS as part of our product innovation. And on top of that, one of our big focuses from an overall marketing perspective is convincing consumers that they can turn their laundry loads to cold. because again, 90% of the energy use in the laundry process is from heating the water. So we want to show consumers that we have the expertise, that we are doing the work to ensure that they can use Tide with cold water and get a fantastic clean. So both from a product innovation standpoint, both from really also wanting to serve our consumer, in this case the astronauts, then also from a marketing standpoint, it was a fantastic opportunity to partner.
So kind of leading into that marketing part, and I found when this was all coming together, it was fascinating to me, and in some ways it was fascinating to me out of my ignorance. I mean, I had been with the ISS National Lab for almost a decade at that time frame when this collaboration was coming together, and I knew that astronauts would wear their clothes days on end, and that there was a certain scent, if you will, that was on station that was permeating, but it never thought, oh yeah, that's right, then we'll just do laundry on the space station. So when you and your marketing communications team were kind of grappling with this and looking at this upcoming opportunity to work with NASA, was that also something where it was kind of like that light bulb moment of, wait a second, they don't get a chance to clean clothes like you and I do here on Earth?
Absolutely, absolutely. And for us, again, serving the consumer, in this case, the astronaut, was first and foremost. But from a marketing perspective, there is a wealth of different ways that we can, quote, point the camera at the fact that astronauts today can't do laundry, and that Tide has the ability to develop a solution for them. They are in many ways an inspirational design consumer for what we can do for folks every day here on Earth. And having the ability to tell that story, to develop a product that we call Tide Infinity that we're currently testing on the station, is really a bridge to where we're trying to take the brand from both a long-term performance standpoint and sustainability standpoint.
Say it fast, 10 times, right?
Yeah, sustainability, sustainability, sustainability.
That's it.
We'll
Good for
keep
you.
doing it.
You know, you keep doing that. We're going to get you a drink afterwards.
Thank
too.
you,
So,
thank you. I might need it.
I hear you. All right, so your team signs the Space Act Agreement, and now comes the fun part, at least from a Marcom perspective. And your team put forth a really aggressive PR push that got an incredible amount of visibility. You brought in some former NASA astronauts to not only provide perspectives on their experience of being on the space station, but also how this collaboration would be impactful for the future. But could you maybe also describe some of the tactics that your team put in to really, again, ingratiate this within the general public?
Absolutely. We relied on a large number of folks who are relevant both from sustainability and also the space exploration space to talk a bit about the partnership. We had the opportunity to run press events with a number of top tier, a number of top tier.
I'm here with you. Don't worry, I got you.
Top tier marketing outlets. We had the opportunity to bring R&D experts in and talk a little bit about the work, and then we also had the ability to talk about how this really exciting partnership with NASA and actually working on this product on the ISS was going to be something that we can reapply to our work here on Earth. And something else that was very exciting about this, and I think you see it on the top right, maybe top left, depending on how it's showing, is we even got earned shout-outs on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, because this was just such an interesting partnership that consumers wanted to hear about and was very newsworthy. And in the end of it all, we got over 1.5 billion impressions from this work, and we earned over 1,000 placements talking about the work that we were doing with the ISS and how that was going to be something that we could bring to consumers here on Earth.
So kind of what I was saying earlier on, space is cool, but in some ways
Very
you just
cool.
got to find a way to really
cool.
have it resonate with the general public, and this is a fantastic representation of that. So you have the big splash. I'm looking at those two pictures on my left. We'll talk a little bit more now about what it was that your team, beyond the PR stuff, actually did on space station. So can you talk a little bit about the R&D investigations that have taken place to date, in what it's been like to go through that process of communicating, not only just doing a Space Act Agreement, but also doing R&D on the space station?
I mean, the first bit of work was actually coming up with a formula that we believed would be able to be stable in a microgravity environment, that would be able to clean with extremely little water, and would also not require much thermal energy to get the job done. And what you see on, again, the top left, right, I'm not sure how it's presenting, was Tide Infinity, our first attempt at developing a detergent like that. We sent it up to the ISS in 2022 as part of Project PG Tide, and we've been testing stability. So do all the ingredients interact in a microgravity environment like they do here on Earth? Because that's an open question. We haven't designed for that before. We've also done some stain testing with the stains that are most relevant to what we would call our consumers, in this case, astronauts. Sriracha, fruit punch, coffee, all things that are plentiful on the space station. We've done some initial testing to see, does this get the stains out? and those tests have been promising. So that's some of the initial work that we've been doing. We also have some work going on with the, and I always get the acronym wrong, CHAPEA project, which is the Mars simulation to see how this will work over a 378-day period, performing laundry duties for a proposed Mars mission.
Awesome. So we'll get a little bit more maybe into some of the future aspirations, but first and foremost, we got to go and kick it down to Jen. Let's talk about the wonderful world of Microsoft. All right, so Microsoft is obviously, you know, one of the more recognizable brands in the consumer sphere, but it's also one that is not afraid to think outside of the box in an attempt to engage audiences around the globe. Can you talk about the culture of innovation at Microsoft and how your job of forging unique partnerships plays a role in that?
Great question. I think the interesting thing is I have a one-of-one job at a 200,000 person company. So that alone is sort of an innovative way to approach cross-company integrations. We have multiple consumer brands under one head, so trying to find innovative ways to tie a cohesive story together, is always an interesting challenge. Our mission is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. So if you think of it from that perspective as a starting point, everything that we do is infiltrated with ingenuity, innovation, like places where there isn't necessarily a huge budget. We have to really dig in, use our smarts, and then we do lean into partners like the ISS and some of the major studio partners. Sometimes when we have a really meaty story to tell, it's a much easier way to do it. Especially when you're talking about things like STEM or EDU or D&I, any things that are really important to our culture. If you make it more digestible through storytelling, it's a really fun way to get people to engage. Like, for instance, we do a lot of things with Make Code, with Make Code Arcade, and it's a really simplified way to get people to try coding, and they're so fun, and you're using 8-bit characters, and at the end of the day, you now know how to do basic code. So we found that's just a really interesting way for us to do innovative things, but overall, I think there's a culture of test and learn. They encourage us to try big things. There was definitely a lot of things that we'd never done before on the partnership we'll be talking about in a minute, but nobody ever made me feel like I should be afraid to fail. So that definitely gives us the opportunity to try and innovate.
Kind of like that. So one of the stories that I love to tell the most about collaboration is one wherein a few years ago, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which is not exactly a subsidiary of Microsoft by any stretch of the imagination, they launched a supercomputer to the ISS in an effort to improve data analysis and to help get real-time data for researchers when they send investigations to the station, which has been a major bottleneck for us over the years.
Yeah.
Typically what would end up happening is you would launch an investigation up, it gets analyzed, it comes back down, it gets analyzed on the ground. Once you learn your stuff, you fly it back up a couple of years. Obviously, that's time-consuming, and that is not ideal for trying to get real-time data. Whereas this supercomputer, it has the ability to process this data, but we still need someone to help bring that data back down. Insert Microsoft and Azure Space. So your team worked alongside Hewlett-Packard Enterprise with this spaceborne computer to assist in some of that real-time data analysis. And I guess the question that I would ask is, you know, what is it about space that kind of takes away like that? We're not trying to compete from a dollar perspective. We're trying to do things for the benefit of humanity. Somehow space has the ability to bring us together. Is that something that you think is symbiotic within this relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're outside of any other type of organization, like, we definitely have a mutual admiration for the things that you're doing, and I think we definitely have some respect built up because of the company that we are. In terms of working with partners that, as you point out, are not necessarily a subsidiary of Microsoft, we have a really unique way of looking at our OEM partners, even though HP makes a completely different owned and operated device. They use our operating system, they use our suite of products, so it really opens up the opportunity to collaborate that alone. And I think we have a shared goal of looking after innovation, and I think that automatically makes people want to dig in, and our guard is less up. But in terms of the supercomputer execution that you were speaking about, we have very smart people working around the company on Azure Space, Azure Orbital Ground Station, strategic missions. They're all focused on finding ways to make the cloud accessible and make interesting ways for information to travel via satellite. So I think we had an initiative, HPE had a really interesting initiative, and we came together to tell a really impactful story and honestly just do the right thing to democratize those tools.
Fantastic, and looking forward to hearing more about that collaboration as the years go on.
Yes.
All right, so now we're going to switch gears entirely. So we had a little fun engagement, a little activation earlier this year. Is that something you care to talk about? Maybe how Star-Lord, the Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe how they made an impromptu visit past the space station?
Yeah, so that was, hopefully some of you have seen the Guardians of the Galaxy or some of the films in the franchise. It seems like a really strange story to tell from the outset of why did Microsoft partner with Marvel and the ISS. But there is a device in the movie called the Microsoft Zune. It wasn't a particularly successful product for Microsoft, so you can imagine it was an uphill battle to try and convince the senior leadership team that we should tell a story about a device that failed and that we no longer sell. But I think what was really interesting about the whole partnership, we've worked with Marvel, they're a trusted partner for several years, and we didn't want to lean in, even though Zune was sort of a new character in the film this time. It was such an important part of the storytelling. We didn't want to lean in on the product. We really needed to find a way to connect to current priorities. And obviously, the ISS really facilitated a lot of that for us. We, instead of just using the current day device, we found a way to 3D print the device at the ISS. And then we could really focus on the importance of 3D printing and microgravity, focus on the importance of STEM learning. We built a whole website on Zune.net. We resurrected the website that was in storage. And we did a diversity in STEM challenge. We had the Make Code Arcade where you could learn about coding. We had a 3D field trip. So like all of these things that were like truly designed to help people understand fun ways to engage in that space. And we also really focused, we also have a Space Act agreement signed with NASA that's focused on STEM and EDU and D&I. And so we really made sure to tell diverse stories. We pulled in some space engineers that came from NASA that now work at Microsoft to tell their stories. We had female and other representation, like really trying to make a point that anybody could be interested in this space and could really have a career in this space. So yeah, all of the confluence of those things came together to really tell a compelling story and help to drive brand love and make people think about Microsoft as a creative force.
As someone that had a chance to be very much so involved in looking at that website beforehand, I can tell you it was quite the jam. So I also think, too, that there was a pretty snazzy piece that was associated with that,
Yes.
too. Is that maybe something you might want to tee up?
I would love to see the snazzy piece.
Let's see if we can.
We partnered with Marvel Studios. They actually created the content for us. We had to use a lot of movie magic to get around some of the restrictions for using some of the space content. But the brilliant minds at NASA helped thread a story where Star-Lord breaks his Zune while he's traversing the galaxy. And he needs to lean in on the ISS National Labs to help him print a brand new Zune, thus the 3D printing. So yeah, it's a great way of threading the story together.
Let's see if it works. Do I have to press it again?
Microsoft, empowering the galaxy. Explore space through STEM at Zoom.net. See Marvel Studios' Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in theaters May 5th.
Got to get the plug for the movie in there.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if everyone would just do things like that, it would make my life so much easier.
Honestly, like it was such a gigantic challenge to tell that story because there's so many disparate pieces, but they did a magnificent job of actually making it meaningful and cohesive.
It was fantastic, and I applaud your team for doing it. And again, hopefully we can do more things like that in the future.
Would love to.
So, in one final question I'd pop up to you. Speaking of Marvel Entertainment, a few years back I had the chance to do a mission patch with them that actually encompassed Rocket and Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy. And then we also had the chance to do a subsequent STEM challenge as well, wherein students would have the ability to fly investigations focused on the physical or technical characteristics of those. So that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. I guess the question that I would ask too, though, is, from your team, this specific push, why the space station?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we partnered early days with Redwire Space. some folks internally had connected us there, and they are the operators of the 3D printer on the ISS. And so we sort of concocted an idea, like, what if we tried to 3D print it? Because we actually first tried to put an old Zune in space, but as you can imagine, it didn't pass the environmental impact study.
Can't imagine why, right?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, Patrick, early days, you were a really big help in helping us understand sort of the importance of the 3D printing and helping to bring that to life. I don't think there would be any other way to have told that story.
Yeah. Well, again, looking forward to talking a little bit more about how we can collaborate more in the future.
Love that.
Well, hello, Jess.
Hi.
How are you? Good morning.
I'm good. Good morning.
All right. Well, let's get a couple questions your way. So I'm very excited to have you on this session, mainly because I think that you bring a very different perspective than a lot of us here on this session, as well as those that are just in the audience as well. But it's also one that's of critical importance because that's the notion of leveraging individuals like yourself who are incredibly accomplished, but at the same time also have very active platforms that have the ability to inspire and let people know about the great things that are happening in space. And so the question that I'd have for you right off the bat is, can you talk a little bit more about how social media, when used properly, can be something that is an effective tool for inspiration?
Absolutely. So aside from being a tool which we can use to obviously educate and be creative with, it can reach a lot of people. And I think more importantly than anything else, especially in space, representation matters. And through social media, we're able to reach kids who mightn't have seen anybody who looks like themselves doing something absolutely fantastic. It's a way of inspiring, and it's a way of generating self-belief and empowering, and it really inspires young kids to be able to believe, actually, yes, I can do that. They might be in an environment where people are discouraging or where they're told their dreams are too ambitious. And so if you can reach a young child or a teenager or maybe someone who's just lost along the way, they might even be in their 20s, their 30s, anybody who potentially looks like you or has a different pathway, it doesn't have to be solely on looks. You're able to capture them and help them realize, actually, I can be involved in this too. And in my case, it's about getting more people involved in STEM and space.
Fantastic. So you became active in pageantry over the last couple of years while completing your degree in aerospace engineering, actively making a point that if you became Miss England, you would push STEM and space initiatives, as you just alluded to. Obviously, here you are with the sash. You are victorious in your endeavors. And so now your pursuits are, or can you tell us a little bit more about how over the last year you have been using this designation to inspire young female students in general, as you kind of alluded to, on how space can impact all of us?
Absolutely. So the story actually started quite a few years back because my work in trying to empower the next generation and educate the next generation is what got me scouted for the contest. And so, yeah, it was never part of the plan to be Miss England, but I feel very blessed that I've been given the opportunity. And essentially, yes, I decided to study aerospace engineering when I was in my early 20s. I didn't go to university when everybody else did because I'd gone into a modeling career, never really knew what I wanted to be, and then years down the line, I decided on aerospace engineering, more so because of how interesting it was, but also aside from that, the scope of opportunities it was going to lead me towards. And so when I started my degree, I realized, actually, there's hardly any girls on my course. Why aren't girls taking this course? You can do so much with this subject. And so I thought back to when I was younger, why I'd never taken an interest in engineering sooner. And it stemmed from a lack of exposure. My dad actually used to say, Jess, you would be a good engineer, but in my head, I thought that meant solely working in a workshop for the rest of my life. And I knew I didn't want to do that. So I completely wrote it off. And so it was, years down the line when I did pick aerospace engineering, I thought, right, it's up to me to address this issue. I'm going to go into schools and I'm going to talk to children and I'm going to show them what opportunities are out there. I'm going to empower them. I'm going to inspire them. And so that's exactly what I did. I started STEM school talks around the UK, which I do completely for free, and I'll do them for any age of child as well. They might be 16, 17, they might be 4 years old, 5 years old. And I talk about all the different opportunities out there, not just in space, but in STEM in general, and show them the different opportunities it can lead you towards and the different industries it can lead you towards as well, because having graduated in aerospace engineering, I now get headhunted for roles in, engineering, of course, consultancy, finance, like loads of different avenues where I would need to solve problems. And I think it's really important to empower the youth and tell them that it's okay if you don't know what you want to be. Follow your passion and it will lead you to your purpose.
Fantastic. Great answer. And that's going to dovetail a little bit into my next question for you, where space is becoming more and more inclusive by the day. I had the chance actually a few years back to come here for a Miss America pageant as one of my family members was competing as Miss South Dakota. And the young woman that won was she was a nuclear research scientist. And then just recently, I was at the NASA SpaceX Crew 7 mission, and the reigning Miss United States is a PhD student in environmental sciences. And then now, obviously, here you are. So, what does it mean that you could be a young woman and that the choice is yours to what you want to do with your life? You could be a nuclear engineer. You could be an environmental scientist. You can be an aerospace engineer, but you can also be Miss England. You could be Miss USA. You could be Miss United States. You can be whatever you want. So can you talk a little bit more on the opportunities that are now available for all people that maybe weren't there previously?
Absolutely. I'm very fortunate that I've got a very supportive family, and they've always encouraged me to be what I want to be and believe in myself. And I think that's it essentially. Like, if the whole world believes in you and believes in your dreams, then that is absolutely fantastic. And I pray that that's the case for most people. But unfortunately for some it isn't. A lot of people will doubt themselves, and when I speak to children, I always say, the job won't get done, the exam won't get sat unless you do the work for it. It's up to you to believe in yourself. So it's great if you've got the rest of the world believing in you, but believe in yourself, because there isn't a difference whether they believe in you or they don't believe in you. The job's not going to get done unless you do it yourself. And so, yeah, with this platform now, and in this day and age, with social media, with representation, what I was talking about before, it really is a force to empower and inspire and show, especially young girls, yeah, you can be whatever you want. These things aren't mutually exclusive. The amount of times I was told aerospace engineering is a boys' subject, you won't be able to do that. The maths is really hard in that subject. And I used to think, what does my gender have anything to do with my ability to do multivariable calculus? Like, I can do that, I can show you, and that stemmed from confidence. Luckily enough, I wasn't persuaded by other people. It's probably because I went to university slightly later. So yeah, it's really important. The world has changed. We are encouraged to be whoever we want to be. Typically, I know that women faced a lot of struggles, and were told you can't do certain roles, and oh, that's only for men, and even men were told, oh, that's a woman's job. And now, like, thankfully, the world is changing. We've got a lot of work to do. But yeah, I think it's important that we've all got our own platforms, and if there's any way that we can use it to inspire and, preach about our passions, then we should, because that's what's going to empower the next generation.
Fantastic message. Andrew, last but not least, once again, you're down there on the end, but, so talk about Sphere, let's go. Last but not least, okay, so there's that thing, as you mentioned, that's right down the street, this amazing venue that has been really the talk of the world recently. Can you talk a little bit about what the motivating factor was for your team to create something so expansive that is so different than what most venues bring for its consumers?
Sure. I think there's a couple of pieces to Sphere that are unique and relevant, and in thinking about what motivated that, it really started from the mind of Jim Dolan, who owns the company, and this is born out of Madison Square Garden Company. And after having come from a long history in Cablevision and looking after selling that company for what's the new opportunity, like how do we really transform entertainment, this was sort of the next step. And because the company had experience in launching satellites and being a music venue and having all these really incredible technologies, they have Radio City and the Beacon Theater and all these other kind of interesting venues around the country. It was like, how do we take the best of all those things and kind of wrap it into something that's actually going to push the business forward? And so that was sort of the original idea. It started with the drawing on a napkin of a circle, and that was sort of, the rest is history. But I think between then, which was 6, 7, 8 years ago, and now, was a lot of question marks, and it was a lot, and not just in one area. It wasn't just about physically building a structure or about putting the content that was going to be in it or about the team that was actually going to drive it forward or what would be set first, second, third, and fourth. It's all those things all at the same time. And so I think first was the vision, and the execution of it was, I think, what continues to kind of surprise all of us because of the teams that we have internally, construction, the team that makes the shows, kind of production, the venue operations. There's so many different aspects of this thing that were really so incredible, and it really took this massive team effort of really not very many people to make it what it is today.
And so now, a couple years later, again, you mentioned this has been a years-long process, and so I thought it was funny. I want to say it was 2-3 years ago, your team petitioned to get an opportunity to leverage the ISS National Laboratory. And I get a note from our team saying, hey, this is going to be moving forward. And I remember thinking to myself, this is really cool that you're going to be testing camera equipment on the space station, but I'm looking at the configurations of this sphere thing, and I'm like, no, this can't actually happen, right? But can you talk about why it is that your team felt as though the space station was an applicable place for you to test your technology for this thing that at that time frame, I'm watching it be built and I'm like, that's no moon. But how does the space station play a role in that?
Around the time that we started reaching out to you, we were doing a project in Antarctica. And in order to prepare for that project, which has, super forbidding conditions, and it was sort of at a time when our camera technology was so nascent because we built all this custom technology to image for the screen that's so huge you can't do it with existing cameras, we rented a trailer, a refrigerated trailer, to drive down to -20 degrees so we could anticipate the temperatures in Antarctica. And it was sort of that thought process, like taking something that we have to test in order to do something specific, that sort of drove us to do what we wanted to do on the ISS, which was, how can we qualify this camera for work off-planet? I mean, so much about for those of you that have been to Sphere or have read about it, the screen is enormous. It's 360 feet wide, and it's the biggest LED screen in the world, and highest resolution, and all kinds of other superlatives. But it's also really vertically oriented, so you're looking up as much as you're looking forward. So underwater and space are really kind of ripe for this format. And so when we tell stories, and we also think about crazy high detail, and then, of course, the next question is, when we have this incredible technology, how can we apply it for use beyond just a beautiful picture and an engaging show? How can you actually use that for science and use it for real material purpose? Also, sphere and space are two words that we've both made into proper nouns.
So building on that, and again, you are literally a storyteller by nature. This is what you do for a profession. So let's talk about space. I mean, that's something that, again, has galvanized the public. What is it, I guess, about this camera to the space station, capturing footage to one day possibly be used on Sphere? Again, like, what is it for you and your team to know that you're having the ability to do that and to really get people fired up about what's happening in space?
I mean, it's obvious both from the people on the panel, people in the room, and everyone that we all engage with when we talk about space, is that everyone gets excited about the opportunities. Everyone gets excited about the unknowns. So it is the final frontier that people are always thinking about, because we've explored so much of our planet. And now as we look kind of beyond, it's not that there isn't more to see here, but it's incredible to kind of think about just the breadth and the expansiveness of what lies beyond. And so I think, sort of like Jess, and being somebody who is like able to embody all the possibility, and as we're like looking at how do we create a tangible version of what's possible going forward, thinking about STEM, I think in the same way with Sphere, it's like taking people to certain places that they can't otherwise go, namely space and the world beyond, Mars, satellite work, and things as we think off, beyond our planet, is really one of the hallmarks of the venue, and like how we can activate just by showing people and by taking people places, that it expands people's minds in those different ways.
Fantastic. All right, so I think that we've kind of done like the initial round of questions. Now it's going to be a little bit more rapid fire, if you will. So Jess, I'm going to start with you and your sash, if it decides it wants to hang up still. All right, so I understand, obviously you're here at Ascend, you're on this session, you're generating some content, but I don't think that this is your only stop while you're over the pond. Can you talk a little bit more about what is in store for you while you were stateside and some of the partners you're going to be working with?
I have some really cool stuff on the horizon, which I am absolutely excited about. So after being at Ascend, I will be flying out to Florida in about 5 days' time. I'm not actually sure what day
You
it
get a
is.
whole weekend in Vegas all
I've
to
got a
yourself.
whole weekend in
Lucky you.
Vegas, I know. So yeah, I'll be flying out to Florida where I'll be creating content with Boeing, touring facilities there, potentially flying some simulators, which I am so excited to have a chance to do. It's been a while since I've flown a sim. And then as well, visiting the Kennedy Space Center and watching a launch, which is truly bucket list for me. I grew up watching documentaries about the Apollo missions and always dreaming to be able to potentially one day, wow, imagine if I got to go and see that. And the first time I went to Florida was actually in 2012, which was obviously afterwards. So to be invited out to get to see a launch, I'm so excited.
Well, and on top of that, too, it's going to be a night launch. There's going to be lots of space goodies that are flying on that mission to the space station. So looking forward to having you out there and, again, seeing how much content you can generate and inspiring people along the way. All righty. So I'm going to do maybe kind of a dual-pronged question for both James and Jen, so J and J. We talked a little bit about how your team's interests in developing campaigns that highlight space and the space station. So P&G, you've been focused more on the research side of the house, whereas Microsoft, you've been more focused on the STEM and outreach side of the house. But as the phrase goes, space is hard. Plus, space takes time. When you look back at the efforts that your respective teams have put in to tell the public of what it is you're trying to do, again, it's a lot of work. But do you think it's worth it?
You want to start it off?
Sure. Yeah, I think on our side, you can't reach new audiences doing the same thing. So it was very hard. Honestly, I think I did shave 10 years off my life working on that partnership. But it was incredibly worth it. Nothing easy or nothing hard, I guess. We don't stay away from difficult challenges. I think it was such a compelling story and such an interesting way for us to bring in learners of all demographics and levels. That, like I said before, I truly don't think there was another way to tell that story. I think the ISS has such a long history of inspirational stories and backing up the messages that we care about as a company. I truly don't know that we would have had, like, Marvel's an amazing corporation and an incredible storyteller, but without the space element of that storytelling, it really it would have felt like a gimmick, and this was really rooted in us trying to bring new learners into the company and empower people.
And in a similar vein for us, we have an ambitious goal to turn 75% of loads done in the U.S. to cold. And the reality is you can't reach every American with the same message. And so this is a really unique opportunity and a very interesting way for us to also show consumers, one, the fact that resource constraints is something that is part of their daily life, but also that we're partnering with some of the experts in the field to develop products for them and give them the confidence to go ahead and make that change. And we saw some of the excitement that consumers had around this messaging with some of the examples that you shared on screen. And the fact that this is getting picked up by news outlets, by late night shows, indicates that it is a message that resonates with our consumers. And so we are going to continue to find every which way we can to get this message out, and we know that different folks are going to react to different ways of getting that done, and the ISS is a fantastic example of that.
Awesome. So Andrew, also maybe a bit on that same thread. I mean, your team to date has flown one camera to the ISS to validate how your team's equipment works in the extreme and novel environment of space. Can you give us a sense of what is next?
Well, we have 2 phases left in our research project on the station, and that at the end will be our camera, EVA, outside the station, which we're really excited about, and provide some unique views from space. There's a camera there. That's number one. We also have a show running now called Postcard from Earth, which is at Sphere and playing 3 times a day. And that was a journey that we shot around the world on all 7 continents, kind of showing the incredible things that happen on Earth and where we think we are kind of with our current state of things and what the future might hold, much of which, spoiler alert, lies off planet. And so that's something that we've just completed and is continuing to run. There's a U2 show at Sphere, and so we've done some work with that, and now we're working on the next shows. So we're really looking forward to not only kind of the content side, what we put in Sphere next and future Spheres, because there are others that are being planned now, which we're looking forward to, but also really kind of learning from what we do on station to figure out how we can get to other things that are far beyond low Earth orbit.
Fantastic. And then subtle plug for those that have not had the chance to go to Sphere and or see Postcards from Earth. It is fantastic, and it is also, I think, a very strong reminder that we are all stewards of this planet, so let's do the best we possibly can to ensure that we leave it in a better place than we got it. So to that end, Jen, back over to you.
Sure.
So one of the first questions I asked you was about Microsoft not being afraid to show their innovative brand for mass audiences, and this ties a little bit into Sphere. So I think I was telling you I came into town on Saturday night. It's 1:30 in the morning. I am very unhappy about my travel day, and I'm just exhausted. All I want to do is pass out, and I look outside of my taxi, and I see the Sphere. But not only do I see the Sphere, but I also see this huge Xbox sign all over it, like it's about ready to come and consume me.
Yes.
I have to imagine that was just kind of a sheer confluence of events with you being here at Ascend, being on this session, and then obviously now having Xbox permeated all throughout Sphere.
Yes.
But that's a really cool activation, and I'm sure that it's one of many that a lot of consumers will take advantage of. Can you talk maybe a little bit about how it's like to work with entities like a Sphere to have an activation like this come to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I always insist that it will be large-scale branding anytime I'm going to speak on a panel. So like that just worked out really well for me. That's
That was your chance to take all the credit.
I know it was. Unfortunately, I cannot. I think early days we had fans and consumers reaching out. They were actually some of the first people to notice that. Obviously, we are aware that the logo for Xbox is a sphere, but we love the groundswell. We were already kind of thinking about that, but the fact that fans were connecting the dots made it sort of a no-brainer. So it became a really important piece when they kicked off the Power Your Dreams global campaign. A lot more to come on that one, but I really, it was such a showstopper. I've never seen more internal company pride of a logo branding. That's usually the antithesis of what we would do. We don't really badge things, but just the nature of the content and the way that you're able to display, seeing the sort of the 3D image of the console and the controllers popping out, and then obviously the iconic image of our logo and that green lighting up the skyline. Actually, my hotel room looks right over the Sphere, so I had front row seats to, I sit on the global media team, so I had front row seats to what our team put together.
Again, very, very cool. So a little bit on a similar thread, we talked about the difficulty of space. We've also talked a little bit about how Microsoft is, again, quite out of the box. But are there other ways in which we can engage with the public through the space station from your perspective? Because, again, you are, as we talked about earlier, kind of space adjacent. This is not necessarily your
bread and
bubble.
butter. Yeah.
But, again, if there are fun and exciting ways for us to think about how we can use station to engage people, I defer to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really natural ways when you think about the breadth of products that are priority for Microsoft right now. I know Minecraft has done some really innovative things, sort of early days with more to come there. The Starfield, the Bethesda team did something with Starfield around the launch of the game. So certainly it makes a lot of sense on our entertainment titles. I think you'll see some exciting things coming out of the console side. Space comes up in way more conversations than I think you would imagine. It's definitely a huge conversation. So I think obviously AI presents some really interesting opportunities as we kind of fine-tune responsible AI overall. But I think an endless amount of opportunities to continue to work with ISS and tell those compelling stories.
Well, we can chat behind the scenes afterwards and go and figure out how we're going to go conquer the world next, right?
I'm very excited about that, yes.
All right, so Jess, private astronaut missions, they're kind of becoming like this new fad. Along with just those of the notion of space participants. I'm assuming that the answer is yes, that you would like to go to space at some point. But what would you like to capture for the masses if you did have the opportunity to go to space?
If I had the opportunity to go to space, I would like to be able to, again, educate more as to why we need to be there, because obviously everybody at this conference knows all the scope of possibilities and why it's important that we go and the research that gets done. But not everybody does that. And when I do school talks, or even when I speak on behalf of companies and different organizations, I always get asked, why do we need to go to space? And so I'd love, if I was to go there, to be able to use my platform to educate, first and foremost, people back down on the ground. I'd love to do what Tim Peake did. He did so many different live shows where he was educating school children as to things he was doing. And I mean, it inspired me. That was before I did my degree. And I thought, yes, I definitely want to do this now, definitely. So that's definitely what I would get up to.
Okay, though, but you get 1 month on the space station. Mm-hmm. You get 3 non-essential things that you can bring with you. What are those things and why?
Well, I would challenge everybody to have a think about this while I answer, because I've been asked this before, and it's quite tricky. But I'm going to say a puzzle book to keep myself occupied over
Just
an
one
evening
book?
time. Am I allowed more than one book? Does that? Would that be a fourth item?
Like a Kindle or something like that?
Potentially. Oh yeah, maybe a Kindle with puzzles on it. Something like that. I don't know. We'll encompass a few things there. Aside from that, potentially that Kindle could also be my music source. That device could be. So that was going to be my second thing, music, obviously to entertain myself as well. And then this last one was definitely a no-brainer for me, coming from England. And I know Tim Peake did exactly the same when he was on the ISS, but tea bags, proper tea bags as well, so I can have a proper cup of tea in space, or as close to that as possible.
That is possibly the most English response you could ever provide, right?
It's very important.
Okay. So James, we talked about what Tide has done to promote being part of the space community. We've also talked about what Tide has done from an R&D perspective on station to date. Do we have any upcoming opportunities to blend that storytelling with future R&D and innovation?
Absolutely. From the R&D and innovation side, as I mentioned earlier, right now we're around day 100 of a 378-day test with the Mars simulated environment. And for us, we want to see what we learn from that, and as soon as we have some of those learnings, the ability to share and use that as an inspiration for both the marketing but also the product development side of our business. And if we think about another big change that we've made to our business recently that ties to a lot of our work on the ISS is that we restaged a majority of our business to explicitly call out that is for high efficiency machines and designed to work in cold water. So continuing to find ways to both focus the camera on the really interesting and innovative work that we're doing with the ISS and that we're going to be learning with our partnership with NASA, the Mars simulator, et cetera, but also finding ways to take some of that inspiration immediately to the consumer here on Earth.
Fantastic. Well, again, looking forward to working with your team as we communicate that story going forward. So, got a couple of questions in here, and then I got a final one for the gang, and then I think we're going to run away. But Andrew, this one might be a little bit more for you, and we've talked a little bit about this. Did Sphere partner with NASA for any of this, or will it in the future?
Potentially. I mean, I think we're interested in telling stories in a new way. And that isn't necessarily a movie, that's just taking people to another place, but making it meaningful. And I think that's really where we're trying to apply all of our technologies. And with any luck, with our work on the station, we're able to qualify that in a way that we can use it in all kinds of places.
Fantastic. Yeah, and again, as of right now, the work that you have been doing has been in association with NanoRacks, and it's sponsored by the ISS National Lab, so it's not necessarily sponsored by NASA yet. At the same time, NASA, as the mothership, is always acutely aware of the types of fun and exciting things that are happening on station. So I'm sure that they will always be in the background as we're having these types of conversations with content generation in the future.
We also, I mean, the idea of this venue and the idea of this technology and the prospect for where entertainment can go and where like the kind of engaging the public in a new way, I think very much aligns with the things that NASA is doing, both from a research perspective, from an access perspective, and from a technology perspective, ranging from, things that happen here on this planet to things that happen far beyond, and we like that. Do I get the 3 questions on the space station?
What would you say?
I think you do now.
I mean, we still got a few minutes, so yeah.
I think actually I might have the same answer as
You're going to bring some tea?
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we don't need hot water for tea. Maybe Tide can help us with that.
I mean, it always helps to smell good when you're up there, right?
Yes.
It's like that quality of life. This one actually I think is more of a question for me. What does the ISS look for in a non-space partner? Fantastic question. So if you are looking to leverage the ISS National Laboratory, you can't use the space station for gimmick-related purposes. There has to be operational feasibility, scientific merit, there has to be the value for humanity. That being said, it is not lost on us that there is a variety of companies, some of them again are represented on this panel right now, that have the ability to tell fun and exciting stories. But first and foremost, it always is about the R&D and how can we use the space station to benefit humanity. Then from there, if there's ways for us to work with your marketing and communications teams to, again, develop fun narratives that are able to go to the general public, we're happy to work that with you in unison. But again, right off the bat, it's always got to be about making sure that there is a compelling R&D argument for leveraging humanity's greatest technological achievement. Alrighty, so I have one final question for everyone. Now I guess we'll run it down. All right, so let's see, what is the final question? This space station has a limited lifespan. As communicators and artists, what can we do more that highlights the impacts that it has had on humanity? And also note too that I'm taking this home for me as well as my NASA counterparts because our job is again to do better. I heard that there was a session earlier today. You know, what has space done for us lately, and what is it that NASA and/or people from ISS National Lab, how can we more effectively communicate the story of the space station or space in general? So you, as people that are not necessarily within the space community, this is a very educational answer for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm a mechanical engineer by training who never actually put it to use. I went into marketing. But one of the things that I would hear continuously throughout my schooling was all of the things that I would say we take advantage of today that we don't realize came out of the space program in one way, shape, or form. And if I also think about our work with the ISS today, it's a fantastic example of using it as an opportunity, as a test bed, an inspiration, an R&D platform to make the things that we use every day better for everyone. And I think that that's one of the things that the ISS has been given, or rather has given our society, and one of the things that we can continue to do a fantastic job of communicating and giving folks the appreciation, understanding of all of the immediate value that comes out of this work and investment.
Fantastic.
I'll answer in a completely different way.
Love it.
From my perspective, I think it's a really intimidating space to, no pun intended, but it's a really intimidating category to break into. And I think the more people, consumers, and also other marketers are seeing these types of engagements, it opens the door for other people to think about innovative ways that they can tell their story. I certainly never ever thought that I would be on a panel for the ISS. So I think using myself as a micro example, looking at other brands that are finding ways to break into space. You're already so innovative, and you're already doing, like, you have the world watching everything that you do. Finding ways that you can bring more people into the fold, having, you know, smaller, ways to meet up with other brands and things so that they can find sort of a way in and have some comfortability, because it's such a labyrinth to sort of navigate, and I think that's a shame because there is so much more we could be doing together.
I think to that point, though, too, there's a variety. I think that while space has gotten, or is difficult, and I think maybe is daunting for people at first, the growing space ecosystem that we have. So, for instance, you know, your team has been working with Redwire Space. You've been working with Natarax. There's a lot of companies that have the ability to kind of bridge the gap for a lot of that.
Instrumental to what we
so
do.
that way, you know, you as a researcher, you as an engineer, you can focus on those things that, you know, are within your wheelhouse, and they can kind of compartmentalize. They can work with NASA. They can work with National Lab to make sure that we're able to streamline everything, and you can focus more on your message and your science.
Everybody was very kind and inclusive and welcoming. It's having sort of a person who can translate, this is what they're actually saying and this is what this means, and, you know, sort of just navigating that whole journey all up. Having Redwire for us was absolutely imperative.
Jess.
So I would say I would like to communicate that space technology is Earth technology. So first and foremost, talk about the things we've created to go up to space with, which actually we've thought, well, we could actually do with that here. There's been so many examples of these fantastic pieces of technology. But then aside from that, I know I'm guilty myself. Whenever I talk about the ISS, I tend to focus on technology, but we do so much medical research up there, which really does benefit us. And I mean, there's things which have already came into play. There's things which are happening right now with the research. And it is so interesting and fascinating to be able to understand how what we're doing up there really does benefit human life. Talking about Redwire just then, the human meniscus that they've just printed, the reasons why we print it there instead of on Earth, and why this can benefit us in the future in a long-term scale. There is a massive scope of things we can educate about, and I think that's really, really important to help people realize why we need to go to space and why the ISS has been massively successful. And the sash just doesn't want to stay up, does it?
I think, to your point. Oops. Here we go. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought with that. But yeah, I mean, again, I think that looking at life science is a great example. You know, one of the arguments that we make is, who is to say that the next great thing that is discovered, what if it's discovered off planet? You know, is that, you know, that's kind of that eureka moment, if you will. But otherwise, there's so many great things that are happening on station, whether that be life sciences, materials, technology development, education, STEM, you know, bringing that all down and letting people know that there's fantastic things that are happening. There's been thousands of investigations that have been conducted on station to date. There's going to be thousands more before we decommission it in 2030 or a little bit after. So there's a lot to still do. Andrew, we'll leave it with you.
I think the thing that's most impressive about the station and how it's really moved things forward is just how it transcends geopolitics, that you've had this incredible partnership between all these different organizations, and in spite of whatever's happening geopolitically, you've really had this incredible partnership prototype that I think is true not only between nation states, but also between governments and commercial opportunities. So that seems like kind of the obvious way that things move forward in the future, because it can't entirely be one or another. No one can afford it politically or afford it financially.
Fantastic. Well, I think that we are just about running out on time. I want to thank the panel for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. I equally want to thank Ascend for allowing us to be here. And last but not least, I want to thank you all, the audience, for joining us here on the last day of the conference. So I hope everyone's able to bear through it and enjoy the remainder of your time in Las Vegas. Thank you very much.